from Big Ten Defensive Player of the Year to averaging just 6.7 points per game at UConn. Serah Williams was supposed to be the missing piece. Instead, she became the biggest transfer regret of UConn's season. So what really went wrong in Storrs?
Prime Field!
Prime Field family, welcome back. Today we're breaking down one of the most uncomfortable but important stories from the UConn Huskies WBB season. Why Serah Williams, one of the most hyped transfers in the country, never became the dominant force UConn expected. And let's be clear right away, this is not about saying Serah Williams had no value. She started every game. She defended. She rebounded. She helped UConn reach the Final Four. But when a player arrives with Big Ten DPOA credentials, all Big Ten production, and nearly 20-10 numbers from Wisconsin, the expectations are different. This was supposed to be a championship-shaping move. Instead, it became a cautionary tale about the transfer portal, offensive fit, Serah's strong superstar rise, and the pressure of playing for Geno Auriemma at UConn. By the end of this video, you will understand why Serah Williams was not a lack of talent problem, she was a fit problem. And for UConn, that might be even more frustrating. When Serah Williams entered the picture for UConn, the hype made perfect sense. This was a 6'4" front court force coming from Wisconsin. She had already been named Big Ten Defensive Player of the Year. She had earned all Big Ten first-team honors. She had built her reputation as a physical, low-post anchor who could score, rebound, block shots, and control the paint. At Wisconsin, Serah Williams was not just another good player. She was the centerpiece. She averaged 19.2 points, 9.8 rebounds, 2.3 blocks, and 32 minutes per game. Those are star numbers. Those are give her the ball and get out of the way numbers. Those are the kind of numbers that make UConn fans think, here we go again. Because on paper, the vision was terrifying. Serah Williams protecting the rim. Serah Strong doing everything. Azzy Fudd stretching defenses. Geno Auriemma managing a deep, experienced, championship-level roster. It sounded like dominance. It sounded like another UConn dynasty reload. It sounded like the type of move that could push the Huskies from contender to unstoppable. But here's the part that gets lost when we only look at resumes. UConn did not need Serah Williams to be Wisconsin's Serah Williams. And that became the problem. Because the version of Serah that dominated the Big Ten needed touches, rhythm, patience, and a system built around her. At UConn, she walked into a completely different world. Now let's talk about the numbers, because this is where the regret conversation really starts. At Wisconsin, Serah averaged 19.2 points per game. At UConn, that dropped to 6.7. At Wisconsin, she averaged 9.8 rebounds. At UConn, 4.4. At Wisconsin, 2.3 blocks. At UConn, 1.3. And her minutes fell from 32.0 per game to 17.4. That is not just a slight decline. That is a complete role change. That is the difference between being a star and being a supporting piece. And for a transfer with that much hype, that is why the word regret enters the conversation. Not because Serah Williams embarrassed herself. She didn't. But because UConn did not go into the portal for a 17-minute role player. UConn did not add a Big Ten Defensive Player of the Year hoping for 6.7 points a night. The Huskies brought her in because they believed she could change the ceiling of the team. And that ceiling never fully changed. Now, to be fair, her field goal percentage actually improved. She shot 49.3% at Wisconsin and 58.8% at UConn, but that number tells its own story. At Wisconsin, she was creating offense. At UConn, she was mostly finishing what others created. At Wisconsin, she was the first option. At UConn, she became a screener, rim runner, rebounder, and defensive complement. That is a massive basketball identity shift, and when you're used to being the focal point, becoming a smaller piece in one season is extremely difficult. That is why the disappointment was so complicated. Serah was efficient. Serah contributed. But Serah was not the game-changing transfer UConn thought it was getting. And then there's the biggest factor in the entire story. Serah Strong. Huskies fans, Serah Strong did not just become good. She became the center of UConn's basketball universe. She finished with 18.4 points, 7.7 rebounds, 3.8 assists, 3.4 steals, and 1.6 blocks per game. She shot 58.2% from the field, 40.4% from 3, and 83.3% at the line. That is absurd. That is national superstar production. That is Serah's strong 2026 to 27 franchise player energy. And that is where Serah Williams ran into the biggest roster problem. Serah needed paint touches. Serah needed time to establish position. Serah needed the offense to slow down enough for her to get into her rhythm. But Serah Strong gave UConn something more dynamic. She could score inside. She could stretch the floor. She could pass. She could defend everywhere. She could run. She could create steals. She could make the game faster and more unpredictable. So when Geno Auriemma had to decide who the offense would flow through, the answer was obvious. It was Serah Strong. And this is the brutal truth. Serah Williams was not bad. Serah Strong was just too good, too versatile, too efficient, too central to everything UConn wanted to become. So instead of Serah becoming the interior co-star, she became the front court support piece next to a superstar who needed space to dominate. And when your role shrinks that much, the disappointment becomes unavoidable. Here's the basketball reason this transfer never fully clicked. At Wisconsin, Serah Williams played in a system where she could be patient. She could run to the block, seal her defender, catch the ball, feel the double team, pivot, gather, and finish. That is low post rhythm. That is physical basketball. That is where she was comfortable. But UConn played a different style. Faster pace, faster decisions, more movement, more guards pushing the ball, more transition, more pressure to make the right read immediately. That created what I call the tempo trap. A traditional post player can look dominant when the game is slow enough for her footwork and strength to take over. But when the game speeds up, the same player can suddenly look rushed. The catches come in different spots. The angles change. The layups are more hurried. The decisions have to happen faster. And when you combine that with UConn level pressure, everything gets magnified. Geno Auriemma even talked about this during the season. He pointed out that Serah could look strong in practice, but in games she sometimes rushed. She wanted to make a statement. She wanted to prove she belonged. She wanted to please. And Huskies fans, that is where the emotional part of this story comes in. Because we have all seen it. A player comes to UConn and suddenly the standard is different. Every missed layup feels louder. Every turnover feels bigger. Every possession gets judged against decades of greatness. This is not just basketball pressure. This is UConn pressure. And for Serah, it looked like she was trying to speed up her game, shrink her mistakes, and prove herself all at once. That is a brutal combination, especially when you only have one season to figure it out. So when people ask why the transfer didn't work, the answer is not simple. It was not just minutes. It was not just touches. It was not just Serah Strong. It was the entire basketball environment changing around her. And that is why this became UConn's most painful portal lesson. And here's what made the whole thing even more frustrating. There were moments when you could see it. There were flashes when Serah Williams looked like the player UConn thought it was getting. One of the biggest came during the Big East tournament against Georgetown, when she scored 14 points and finally looked more comfortable, more assertive, more decisive. For a second, Huskies fans started wondering, is this it? Is this the breakthrough? Is Serah finally about to become that March difference maker? But Geno Auriemma was not ready to crown it. His message was basically, once could be an accident, twice could be a coincidence, but consistency is what proves a real trend. And he was right, because at UConn, one good game is not the standard. The standard is doing it again, and again, and again, especially in March. That Georgetown game almost made the regret sharper, because it showed what was possible. It showed the version of Serah that could have changed UConn's front court. It showed the size, the touch, the physicality, but it never became the consistent reality. And for a team chasing a national championship, flashes are not enough. You need reliability. You need a role that travels. You need production when the opponent gets bigger, stronger, and more physical. And that is where the Serah Williams experiment remained unfinished. Then came South Carolina. UConn's undefeated dream ended in the Final Four with a 62-48 loss. And when a season ends like that, every roster decision gets re-examined. Every weakness gets magnified. Every what-if gets louder. What if Serah Williams had fully clicked? What if UConn had gotten Wisconsin-level production from her? What if Serah Strong had a true interior partner who could punish elite defenses inside? What if the transfer that looked like the missing piece had actually become the missing piece? That is why the regret conversation matters. Not because Serah alone lost that game. Absolutely not. Basketball does not work that way. But because she was brought in to give UConn another answer in games exactly like that. Against size, against physicality, against elite defensive pressure, against the kind of team that can turn a beautiful UConn offense into a grind. And in the biggest moment of the season, Huskies fans were left wondering whether that answer ever truly arrived. That is why this was more than a normal transfer disappointment. This was a transfer that was supposed to raise the ceiling. Instead, it became one of the biggest what went wrong stories of the season. And now we get to the part that affects UConn's future. Because Serah Williams may have changed how fans view the portal, and maybe even how Geno Auriemma approaches it. The portal can give you talent, but it cannot guarantee fit. It cannot guarantee chemistry. It cannot guarantee that a player who is dominant in one system will instantly thrive in another. That is the lesson. UConn did not miss because Serah Williams lacked ability. UConn missed because her best version required a different role than the one available in Storrs. And now look at the direction of the program. The 2026-27 roster is not being built around another major portal splash. It is being built around Serah's strong development, culture, and young talent. Marine Dursis joins as an international guard from France. Olivia Vukosa brings major front court upside. Giovanna Popovic adds more international skill. Morgan Shelley is working her way back. And Geno is trying to shape a roster that grows inside the system instead of forcing the system to adjust around a one-year transfer. That is huge, because UConn's greatness has never been about chasing headlines. It has been about building habits, standards, chemistry, and selfishness development. And Serah Williams, as talented as she was, became the reminder that not every big-name transfer is automatically a UConn player. That is the real regret, not the player, the fit, the timing, the expectation, the idea that one portal move could instantly solve everything. So why was Serah Williams UConn's biggest transfer regret? Because the hype was enormous, the resume was real, the need made sense. But the result never matched the expectation. She went from 19.2 points at Wisconsin to 6.7 at UConn, from a 32-minute centerpiece to a 17.4-minute role player, from Big Ten star to supporting piece, from missing championship piece to what went wrong. And again, that does not mean Serah Williams was a failure. She started every game. She helped UConn win. She reached the Final Four. She got drafted. But for UConn, regret is measured against expectation, and the expectation was dominance. The expectation was interior power. The expectation was a transfer who could change March. That version never fully arrived. Now the Huskies move forward into the Serah Strong 2026-27 era with a clearer identity. No more guessing. No more forcing fits. Build around Serah Strong, develop the young talent. Let Marine Dursis and the new international class grow. Trust Geno Auriemma's culture. And turn that Final Four disappointment into fuel. So now I want to hear from you. Was Serah Williams truly UConn's biggest transfer regret? Or was this simply a great player trapped in the wrong role at the wrong time? Drop your take in the comments, because this is one of those debates where Huskies fans are going to have strong opinions. And if you want more UConn Huskies WBB breakdowns all offseason, Serah Strong, Geno Auriemma, Marine Dursis, roster battles, recruiting, and the road back to the national championship, hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Because the 2026-27 revenge season in Storrs, it might already be loading.
I'm free.